A common feature of any spiritual wilderness is the jerks, the assholes, the villains. How do we relate to them? Our limbic system says freeze, fawn, fight, or flight. In my social media feed, there's a fair amount of fight, some freeze, some flight, and we've all seen a nauseating amount of fawn, the billionaires falling over themselves to prop up a fascist agenda. Ancestral wisdom suggests a response that's a little more complicated than these four options, a little more controversial. Heads up, it might upset you, but I think it's powerful and strange and intense enough to be a potent tool in this spiritual wilderness. In this episode, we're going to talk about 70 Faces, checking biblical assumptions, Tehora, it is pure, pre-prayer tests, Hitler's daughter, two villains from one of my own spiritual wildernesses, and Frank, and a practice for bringing Miriam's Living Torah into our own lives. Content warning, we will mention sexual violence, so please choose to listen with care. There's a good chunk in here that is definitely not kid-friendly. I'm Jericho Vincent, your local feminist, trans, Kabbalistic rabbi, and this is a survival guide for a spiritual wilderness. Let's continue on the path. I'm going to tell a familiar story in a new way. Just a heads up, you might find it upsetting. It is said that there are 70 faces or interpretations to any piece of Torah. These are sacred myths. They can be read in endless ways. This idea that I'm going to share here, it doesn't negate the 69 other ways of exploring the same story. Last episode, we watched little Miriam sitting by the side of the river, using her chakema, her wait for what, to observe her brother as he floated in a basket on the water. She watches the basket drift towards a woman bathing in the water, surrounded by an entourage. This woman is Basya, daughter of the Pharaoh, princess of Egypt. The sacred text, it tells us that Basya sees the basket in the reeds, in the water, and she sends her slave girl to fetch the basket. She opens the top, and she sees a baby crying. She says, "This must be a Hebrew child." Then Miriam steps forward from her place at the side of the river after waiting, watching with chakema. It's her moment to act. And she asks, "Can I get you an Ivri nurse, a Hebrew nurse for this baby?" When the princess says yes, Miriam runs home to her mother, who's grieving her dead son, and says, "Come with me. Your baby is alive. The princess is hiring you to be his wet nurse to breastfeed the child." I heard this story so many times as a kid. It's always told looking backwards from what we all know ends up happening, and so it assumes this air of inevitability. But let's check our assumptions. When I really put myself into that scene, it's very shocking. I'm Miriam. I'm standing on the riverbank watching my brother. I see Pharaoh's daughter grab him. Pharaoh's daughter, Pharaoh's the one who sentenced this child to death. He's killing all the baby boys. Pharaoh is like the Hitler of that time, and Basya is basically Hitler's daughter. It would not be my first thought that Basya is gonna scoop this baby up, save his life, and not only let him live, but adopt him as her own son. And yet Miriam steps forward, assuming exactly that. And not only does she assume that the princess wants to adopt the baby, she assumes she'll want to follow best practices for cross-cultural adoption and ensure the baby has some of his native culture, right? Miriam says, "Can I get you an Ivri nurse, a Hebrew nurse, for this baby? Because, of course, that's what you'll want." In this moment, when Miriam steps forward with these assumptions, she's demonstrating the third core tenet of her Torah, the third tool for surviving in a spiritual wilderness. We're going to call it Tehora. It is pure. Tehora, it is pure, is the radical, highly countercultural affirmation that every single human being has a core of inviolable goodness that they can always return home to. The name for this tool comes from a prayer that's traditionally said every morning. Elohai Neshama shenatata bi Tehora. Goddess, the spirit you have given me, it is pure.
Elohai Neshama shenatata bi Tehora.
There's no test you have to take to prove yourself before you say this prayer. It's taken as a biological fact of life that every person's spirit is pure. Pure, it means incorruptibly good. Every person's spirit is good, and that goodness can't be sullied. Well, how do we square this purity with how terrible some people seem to be? We can distinguish the core of a person's spirit from their behaviors and from the character that they build from their behaviors. Behaviors can be bad, and people can have terrible, ugly characters. But inside every single person, buried under however much gunk, is that core of goodness, that purity. In the Jewish tradition, the practice of making things right when we fuck up is called teshuvah, return. Because repair and repentance, it's a coming home to that internal purity that's always there waiting for us. I don't know what kind of reputation Basya, Princess of Egypt, had when Miriam saw her, but whatever it was, Miriam stepped out of the reeds and saw that core of goodness in a woman who should, by rights, have been her fearsome, loathsome enemy. And Miriam spoke directly to that goodness. Of course, princess, you'll want to adopt this child, and you'll choose a Hebrew nurse. Some people get really upset about this idea of Tehora. They pull out the big guns. They ask, what about Hitler? Are you going to say Hitler had a core of goodness? To which I'd reply, yes, but there are two things that I want you to consider. One, if you say Hitler didn't have a core of inviolable goodness, a pure spirit within, that he was just a monster through and through, how can we hold him responsible for what he did? What can you expect of a monster but to act monstrously? To call someone a monster, it lets them off the hook. When I affirm that Hitler or any other bad guy has this core of goodness, I'm affirming that they are responsible for making the horrifying choices they do, because every single step along the way, they had a chance, no matter how small, to make a different choice. The second thing I'll say is, as a rabbi, when I get this challenge, what about Hitler? I often find that with a little digging, the person challenging me is actually thinking about someone else who they have an even harder time believing has this core of goodness. Themselves. So many of us have a core wounding around our goodness. So let me be crystal clear here. Your spirit, it is pure. If you've messed up and you haven't made it right, you might have some bad actions you need to address, even bad character flaws. But no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, your spirit is and will always be pure. The mystical master Reb Nachman called this core of inner goodness ma'at tov, a little bit of good that's present in the core of every single human. And Reb Nachman teaches a complex and beautiful piece of Torah on the spiritual physics of taking the time to locate that Tehora, that core purity. He says that we actually transform the person that we're interacting with in a small but real way simply by insisting on the presence of that goodness within them. Now, this is a hard tool. We're in a fucking spiritual wilderness, people. The tools that enable us to not only survive but thrive are sophisticated. They're gonna challenge us. But Miriam is here to cheer us on. We are up to the task. I want to tell you a story of my own struggle with this principle, Tehora, an ugly story. I'm not going to make it pretty. I'm going to be really frank. And again, content warning for sexual violence. If you've got young kids around, you'll probably want to put on some headphones. I wrote a memoir about my experiences leaving ultra-Orthodoxy called Cut Me Loose. It doesn't tell all of my stories, but it does describe how at 17, alone in New York City, abandoned by my family, I fell in love with a 24-year-old man I call Nicholas, who I met at the local park. I was obsessed with Nicholas, delighted when he took an interest in me, said he liked me. I was excited but nervous that he wanted to make out with me, but I didn't want to have sex. Despite my no, one night Nicholas decided yes. There's another story that I don't tell in my memoir that an editor told me to cut because there was already too much violence in the book. But in a way, it was even more consequential. I had one friend I trusted at that time when I knew Nicholas, one friend in the city. I'll call him Jordan. I met Jordan at the same park that I met Nicholas, but unlike the other men there, Jordan was never creepy. He was always kind. When I got locked out of my apartment, he let me stay at his house. One night, I fell off my bike and broke my arm, and he was the person I went to. As he very gently washed the gravel out of the wound, I fainted on his bathroom floor. I thought of Jordan as a good guy. Sometime after my relationship with Nicholas had ended, I went to hang out with Jordan. We were watching a movie in his room when he surprised me by kissing me. I laughed, trying to normalize the situation, shook him off. He laughed too, kept laughing as he continued his advances as if this was all a game. Kept laughing as he blocked me when I tried to run for the door. Kept laughing as he locked the door, threw me down, held me down as I begged him to stop. Kept laughing as he raped me. I lived with these wounds, along with others like them, for a long time. And then when I was 33, I met my life partner, Ben Ash. We fell in love fast and hard. Early on, we got curious about how to use our combined wisdom to explore healing our wounds. When I told Ben about Nicholas and about Jordan, he was surprised by how much monumental space these guys still took up in my brain. I was not surprised. I was used to it. I hated these guys. They messed me up. But here's a pesky phenomena that occurs over and over again in emotional physics. When we have a polarized feeling, a really intense feeling, we often, if we dig around, discover that we also have the opposite feeling. When I spent a little time in my inner world, I realized that some part of me still loved these men. Nicholas, who I'd fallen in love with at 17, Jordan, who I'd thought of as my friend. It was shocking. My self-reflection exposed that subconsciously I'd been ping-ponging between hatred and adoration to simplify perspectives. In hatred, I saw these guys as monsters. I denied that they had any goodness within them. In adoration, I saw them as infallible men, all good, no accountability, no judgment. Ben invited me to do something very difficult, to practice Tehora, it is pure, to try on the idea that each of these men had a core of goodness and had made terrible choices, that I could affirm their goodness and hold them responsible for the harm they'd caused. Oh, that was hard. That was much, much harder than monster or angel. That required me to really face who these men were as human beings, what wounds might have shaped them, to look straight on at the fact that they had goodness within, but had made this choice to let their wounds and confusion take control, and they'd hurt me. Oh, there was so much more grief in this way, such a poisonous wave of grief. But I remember the feeling in my brain after that grief had moved through. The intense physical sense of poof, the ghosts of these men that had been crowding my brain for all these years shrunk into normal size, painful memories. That's a story about using Tehora, it is pure, on memories. It's a different thing entirely to use it in the present. Every single damn day I open the news, I am challenged to use Tehora, it is pure, in the here and now. And that is hard. It would be such a relief to think about the awful people in the headlines as monsters, to dismiss them in that way. It's much more painful to remind myself, Tehora, they have a core of goodness. That doesn't mean I don't hate them sometimes. I think hate can be a very natural reaction to evil actions. But an excess of hate can eat you alive. Like a meditation, again and again, I try to channel Miriam's energy and remember that every being has this core of goodness. This is a spiritual choice, but it's also strategic. If we speak to the worst in someone, if we call them deplorables, we often bring out the worst in them, and we can ping-pong in an ever-escalating dance. I imagine a scene in which Miriam burst out at Basya, shrieking, "Don't you dare touch my brother, you filthy pig!" I don't think it would have ended well. Miriam offers us 5 tools for surviving in a spiritual wilderness. This is the 3rd one, and I think it's the trickiest. It's very advanced, very nuanced, and I think it has enormous power to help us survive and thrive. In the modality of internal family systems therapy, IFS, this Tehora, it is pure, is called self. The founder of IFS, Dick Schwartz, writes, "Mindfully curious, calm, confident, and often even compassionate, that's the part I call self. And after thousands of hours doing this work, I can say with certainty that the self is in everybody. Furthermore, the self cannot be damaged. There is ample evidence that our negative expectations of others have a strong negative impact on their behavior or performance. The view of humanity that has dominated the Western world trends towards the pessimistic. Once we shift paradigms to the knowledge that at their essence, everyone is decent and kind, we can reorganize our economic systems, schools, and prisons." Or, in the words of the great Jewish teacher, Anne Frank, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death." Tehora, it is pure, invites us to root in the goodness always present in the world, even in the most barren wilderness. Most of us are not going to talk to the people making headlines for doing awful things. But in this spiritual wilderness, a lot of us are going to talk to family members or neighbors or coworkers who are supporting awful things. What becomes possible if we appeal to that goodness within? Again, not backing away from our clear-eyed knowledge of what is evil, but returning again and again, like a meditation, to the core of goodness that is present in each being. It's a painful choice, and it's not always going to result in transformation as it does when Miriam so expertly wields it. But assuming every person's capacity for goodness, that Tehora, that purity inside, is a powerful tool. It can de-escalate us from a nightmare frenzy and bring us back to the much thornier but realer challenge at hand, back to a path through this wilderness. Let's take a moment to practice using this tool of Tehora, it is pure. I invite you to get comfortable in your seat. Feel your weight in your chair. Feel the chair holding your weight. Lower your gaze or close your eyes. Bring to mind someone who has hurt you, a hurt of a size that feels okay to work with right now. Remember what they did, how it felt to be hurt in that way. Feel your anger, feel your disgust or your sadness, whatever reaction you've been having to this person. Affirm your reactions, that it makes sense to feel the way you feel, that your emotions are important and you're going to take them seriously. Turn back to the person who hurt you. See them at their ugliest in the moment of causing most harm. Imagine that at their core, maybe somewhere in their upper chest, there is a spark of pure, sweet goodness. Tehora, a core that is good. Some people find it helpful to imagine this person as a baby and imagine that spark of pure, sweet goodness coming out of their chest. And then fast forward to a more contemporary moment, present day, to the moment they hurt you, and see if you can locate that spark within, again, however deeply buried. The meditation challenge for you is not to erase the image of the harm they caused, not to excuse them, but to be able to hold the truth of the damage they caused in your mind with the truth of their core of goodness. When you've got both fixed in your mind, breathe into this scene. Turn your attention to your own body. What shifts for you when you hold this complexity? What feelings want to be felt? Pause my voice for as long as you'd like to be present with yourself. Imagine a river of purple, blue, loving energy, Miriam energy, flowing towards you and this person at a rate that feels okay to you. When it reaches you, it winds around your body, a cocoon of care, a cocoon of safety, tender, concerned about your wounds. When it reaches the person you've been thinking about, it feeds their core of goodness, which grows within them. And the person in your mind's eye starts to make better, kinder, more responsible choices. What do they do, nourished by Miriam energy? What actions do they take? How does it feel within your own body to see this person who caused you harm making better choices? Stay with this as long as you'd like. When you're ready, thank yourself, thank your heart for allowing you to be present with these difficult emotions. Then use your hands to gather up the purple indigo Miriam energy from all around and compress it into a small seed and place it with your right hand, hand of compassion, palm down on your belly. Place your left hand, your hand of strength, on top of your right. Imagine that seed of Miriam energy that enables your spiritual chutzpah. Feel it rooting into your ability to chakema, to wait for what, moving down into the earth beneath you. And then feel that powerful seed of Miriam energy growing stronger, growing a trunk of strength that moves up your spine, a strength that is supple and calm, a strength that belongs to you. I want to pray for us in this painful moment. I pray, Mora Miriam, Ancestor Miriam, I'm grateful that your wisdom survived all these generations to support us in this difficult time. Please give us the courage and the strength to remember the Tehora, the core of goodness within every being. Please give us the power to speak to that goodness in the people around us and in ourselves. And in that choice to speak to the Tehora, may our words cause goodness to grow and flow in the most narrow of spaces, that we might see our world shift towards justice, towards compassion, towards liberation for all. So our survival guide is growing. We know spiritual chutzpah, we know chakema, we know wait for what, we know Tehora, it is pure. These are tools from Miriam's experience in the spiritual wilderness of slavery. Next time we explore the fourth tool that emerges the moment Miriam touches down in a new spiritual wilderness after being freed from slavery, where Miriam really steps into powerful leadership. Join us as we learn what tool Miriam uses to guide the people in a difficult time. It might surprise you. I'm Rabbi Jericho Vincent, and I'm so excited to take this trip with you, guided by the ancestor Moa Miriam. This is a survival guide for a spiritual wilderness. I'll see you on the path.
Walk with me together through this wild and stormy land. Walk with me, my friend, together. Reach out and take my hand. Open up your eyes to the sunlight. Open up your heart to the sun. Listen to the drum beat so steady. Together we can overcome. Take my hand, and together we will walk down this winding road. Look around, and together we won't fear what we don't know. Open up your eyes to the sunlight. Open up your heart to the sun. Listen to the drum beat so steady. Together we will overcome. Walk with me together as we cross this beautiful land. Walk with me, my friend, together, all of us, hand in hand.
Thanks to Ella Joy Meir for the beautiful original music, to the Kanfei Edges group, to my creative partner Ben Blum, to Moa Miriam for her guidance, and to Ruach Olam, the oneness within, between, and beyond us all. Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness is part of the Judaism Unbound family of podcasts made possible with support from Lippman Kanfer Foundation for Living Torah.